And welcome to the Hoops and Dreams QPR Season Preview ahead of 2024-2025. I'm James and I've been joined by Brian and Dave to go over the QPR pre-season performances, to look at the transfers in and out, the QPR squad, and we'll give our overall thoughts on the championship. And later in the show, we'll be giving our predictions of where we think QPR will end up this season. I'll just give a very quick plug to our QPR prediction games. We have 3 free games that you can play every week throughout the season on our message board. They're all available to enter now. And in modern technology, we've got the QR code on the screen now. And if you scan that, it'll take you directly to the QPR Prediction League. You know you want to try it now, don't you, just to see if it works. So give it a go, please. And on with our QPR season preview. First thing for me to say is I think it feels very different to a year ago. I don't think anybody was looking forward to last season where we basically all thought we were going down, and we would have done if it wasn't for Marti Cifuentes. This year, Dave, do you think there's a little bit more hope and optimism around the club at least?
I mean, there has to be more than there was this time last year. It was dreadful, wasn't it? I think we just lost 5-0 to Oxford and we're about to get hammered at Watford. It felt pretty grim like going into last year, but it does feel a bit more positive this time, and it's mostly to do with the manager. I think he showed last year with pretty much the same squad for a lot of it that we had under Ainsworth, that he could get results for this team and this squad, and he's made a couple of additions. I'm sure there'll be more, and I think everyone's hopeful it's going to be a lot better than last year. Probably not expecting going up or anything like that, but I think it should be a lot better than last year.
Yeah, Brian, pre-season results, do you think they've tempered expectations a little bit, but do you think that could actually be a good thing?
There's no doubt that pre-season matches don't really give a great indication of anything other than the fitness. That being said, you've got to turn around and say, well, okay, we didn't do very well in terms of scoring. That's the area that I think everybody's going to turn around and say, yeah, okay, the defense was good, and Brighton was a very good example there. We were camped in that. They were camped in our half for most of the match, and the defense held very well against a Premier League side that, I think somebody said that our total team comes to something like 23 million in value. That's probably a leg of a Premier League player for Brighton. I mean, come on. So we've got to be reasonable about this. But what I liked about the pre-season was the levels of fitness. And the balance of the way that the players were playing. You did feel suddenly it wasn't a question of, unlike 12 months ago, square pegs in round holes. You actually saw that players were playing together, working together to get the ball back when they'd lost possession. Everything about it, I think, was positive, apart from the goal scoring. I'll keep coming back to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we started with 2 wins in Spain against lower quality opposition. But like you say, since we've returned to England, it's not gone exactly to plan. 4 games without QPR scoring a goal. I agree, we put in decent enough accounts of ourselves against Spurs and Brighton. What have you made of it all in pre-season, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, he seems to have picked a higher level of opponent than we've had in recent years. Brighton and Tottenham, you're not going to play teams as good as that in the league this season unless we're really unlucky. And just looking at what he's done, he does seem to be trying to change the style and trying to play out and beat that press. And 2 of those teams, Brighton and Tottenham, are known for playing a high press. And he's tried to do that against 2 really good sides. It hasn't really worked, but it's going to, they're not going to play teams as good as that when it comes to the season. So it was good practice for them, really. And, for me, pre-season results don't matter too much. I remember I went to a pre-season game quite a few years back. We played Plymouth at home and drew, and I thought, God, we look awful, and we won the league that year. And we've had years where we look really good in pre-season and done absolutely nothing. So, like Brian said, it's more about the fitness looks good. They look pretty well organised, especially at the back, and you just want to get on with it and get started now, don't we?
Yeah, we certainly don't need to panic. I think some people with the lack of goals have started to get into panic mode, but the results haven't been that bad. Reading scored from a Kenneth Powell mistake in that game. I thought we played really well against Spurs, better against Spurs than we did against Brighton. And even against Brighton, it was only a stupid penalty that cost us. So we look competitive. Obviously, the lack of goals is going to be a continual thread probably throughout this podcast and beyond into the season, I think. You've touched on the Marti Cifuentes tactics. It's been a hot topic since the end of last season. If he changed things, have you seen any differences, Dave?
Definitely in playing out. You can see that he needed a goalkeeper that could do it. Begovic couldn't do it. He tried it when he first came in, didn't he? And they scrapped that pretty sharpish. They've got a keeper now that can play out, and they seem to be trying it, and they're trying to, like I say, beat the press and then get the opposition's half quite quickly. But to do that, they're going to need better in midfield, in my opinion. You look at yesterday, a few of the mistakes come from playing out and then Colback losing it. They do miss Hayden with that, who can play on the half turn. Maybe Varane coming in is that sort of player that can do it. So that does seem to be a change. But as we've seen with Cifuentes, he's very adaptable, and I don't think he's going to have one set way of playing and that's it. I think it'll kind of depend on who we're up against. He'll want to play this way, he'll want to play out in the kind of Spanish way and play through the lines like that. But I think he's adaptable, and he will change it if he feels it's not going to work.
Yeah, passing out from the keeper is the biggest difference that I've spotted in the matches. We're having a lot more possession in our own half. And as the Brighton penalty showed, it looks like we could be the architects of our own downfall quite a lot this season if we're not careful. Don't you think, Brian?
Yeah. I mean, when I was there for that, and that looked to be a really soft penalty. No VAR, of course, to confirm it, but it felt that to me. But yeah, you can see, what you're saying about moving it out from the back. Yes, he's strengthened that, if anything, over the close season. But he's moving out to the wings now. That's the next thing he's trying to do is improve it moving along the wings. And that's where we're struggling at the moment. And the reason we struggled, from my mind, yesterday was because Brighton adopted a very high press, as did Tottenham as well, I might add. But Brighton were really physical with it, and they rolled up the centre backs, camped themselves in on the edge of our on the halfway line, effectively the centre backs, and condensed the midfield. Our midfield then decided, the best thing to do for us under this pressure is come back. So there was nobody then to pass on to. That in itself made it very, very difficult. And the idea of Cifuentes, I think, is to pass between the lines of defenders. There was such a compressed line of defenders. There was no gaps. I think we got away once, I think, or maybe twice with Seller. Once he was offside, and the other one he just couldn't do anything with it. But that's what you're going to have to do. We need probing balls coming forward, and that's something we're going to have to focus upon, I think, very much so. And I will add the new addition of Jonathan Varone, or Varane, or whatever it is. He, I think, will make that difference. I can see him in Colback's role, and I can see him distributing the ball very, very well. I mean, judging by the videos we've seen of him anyway.
Yeah, hopefully Varane will be a link between the thirds, only a bit more dynamic across the pitch. I know it's an idealistic way to play the way he's setting us up, but it's almost overkill at times. I felt in the pre-season games, Paul Nardi's seeing more of the ball than I would particularly want our goalkeeper to have. But obviously it's a work in progress, and hopefully we get the balance right as we go through the season. Something that has been consistent, though, under Marti Cifuentes is we don't concede much. That's still been the case. We look compact, hard to break down. You touched on it already, Brian. But that's a good foundation for the season ahead, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I was thinking about this earlier on before we came on. Really, our defence, if you're going to have a good, solid defence, you can build upon that. If you've got a defence that we had like last year, where everybody was wondering what the hell was going to happen, until we got to sort of October and things started to change, we were a liability when it came to defending. Absolute liability. It just wasn't working. He's turned that round, and this is quite amusing because here we're talking about Cifuentes being an attacking, possession-based player, manager rather, and suddenly it's the defence we're going on about how good it is. So he's done the hard work now. His coaching staff have sorted out the defence. Now we need to build on the midfield, and then we need to build on the attack. Not necessarily in that order, mind you, coming that.
Yeah, he'll have learnt an awful lot from the matches. Like you said, he said it himself. He wasn't really bothered about the results. It was more about the performances, and he'll know what he's looking to improve. And there is still another month because we're going to come on to the transfers now. Things can still change, but I have a suspicion by the end of August, teams will look very different to how it looked in May at the end of last season. If we look at the departures first, Willock, Armstrong, both gone. Rumours that Kenneth Powell, Jake Clark-Salter could be sold too. For me, it's not great that Willock and Armstrong would prefer to be at Cardiff and Bristol City. Is it just because they're paying more, or is there something else to it, Dave?
For the Willock one, I didn't really understand. I thought he would go look for a bigger club. I don't think those options were there for him. Maybe they've given him more money. I don't know. I found that one an odd one. With Armstrong, it was a difficult one. He was in the last year of his deal, so I could see why the club have looked to sell him. Bristol City is probably a step up from us if we're realistic. They've been better than us the last couple of years, and I think he might do well there. I think the club were right to take the money for him. I think it's a good deal that they got, but I do think it's a shame we let him go. He's a player with so much potential, and I do think we're going to miss him. The team just really lacks pace and energy going forward without him. I do think it's a shame, but I get it. I get why they did it. It was the right thing to do.
Yeah, Brian touched on it about the pre-season matches. Though, when we're passing it around, we could do with Armstrong or someone like that to be able to play over the top stretcher team. Do you think we'll miss Armstrong, Brian?
Oh, I'm going to say no. Honestly, I think grab the money and run. I'm quite happy with that because I think there are other players out there who are more of the finished article, and I think that we're going to find them. So no, I'm not that worried. I think Seller could turn out to be a lot better. Our biggest problem, let's be honest about this, is finishing. Sinclair Armstrong tearing towards you down the wing frightens the life out of you. I mean, it really does. But you know that he's never going to score, or hardly like to score, then you're probably not quite as worried about him being on the pitch. I'm happy for him to have gone. Honestly, I am. I'm happy to have Mr. Cellaret come in and a revitalised Frey. He seems to be a lot fitter than I remember him being. He looks, definitely an improvement.
I think the thing with Sinclair Armstrong is I saw a really good quote from someone that said they wouldn't be surprised if he was playing in the Champions League in a few years, but also they wouldn't be surprised if he was playing in the National League as well, because you just can't tell. Yeah. You can't tell which way it's going to go with him. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. And at least the club got a good deal for someone who was likely to be leaving in 12 months for free. Two other departures were out on loan. Taylor Richards has gone to Cambridge. Ziad Larkesh gone to Dundee. Are you still holding out hope for any of them, Dave?
I think Larkesh could come back and do well. I think he signed quite a long deal, and he was okay when he featured last year. I mean, Taylor Richards seems like a lost cause. He's been here 2 years. He's hardly featured. He's hardly trained. So, you hope he goes there and does well and maybe gets himself a move. I just can't see it happening for him here. That signing was a complete disaster, to be honest with it.
100%. Brian, do you think either of them will come back better players?
I agree with Dave, 100%. Taylor Richards, definitely a lost cause. I know you can't take him out and shoot them. But I do think Larkesh is definitely somebody who's going to come back and will be better, for his time over at Dundee. Definitely.
If we look at the players next who've come into Loftus Road, key arrival, you've given him a name check a few times already, Zan Salar, Slovenian international. Initial impressions, Brian?
I think that it's very difficult. God, we go on this every year. We go on about this about strikers when they get sick or suspended. It's trying to get them back into that match fitness and the match awareness so that they can suddenly go for it and actually complete a move and score. I think he's close. I really think he's close, and I hope I'm right because we need a striker up front. Who's going to go for it. I mean, they played him yesterday with Frey as a duo, and I thought, well, that's pretty bold, but it didn't work. But it was an idea, and the truth is, let's be honest about this. Despite Coley's fantastic efforts, he really isn't a match for Chair. We're missing Chair.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back onto that, I think, when we discuss the squad in a minute. But in terms of Salah, Dave, we know he averages around 15 goals a season in Switzerland. Would you bet on him reaching that total for QPR this season?
I hope so. Yeah, we need him to. I mean, we've been saying ever since we started this podcast, we need strikers who can score goals, and hopefully he's one that's going to come and do it. And, what we've seen of him so far, I mean, it was a difficult game for him against Brighton. We hardly had the ball all game, so he wasn't going to do a lot, really. So I think we'll see more of him in the coming weeks and months when he settles in. But, from what we've seen so far, the clips and what his record is in other countries, he sounds promising. And it's the kind of player you need to be sort of looking at, someone who's a bit under the radar and can come in and do something. I'm sure they'll look to add more as well because, you're looking at him, he's probably coming and replaced Armstrong. I still think even if they'd have kept Armstrong, they needed even more as well on top of that. So we'll see what happens the next few weeks. But I'm hopeful he'll do well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, very, very hard to judge him on the Brighton game, like you both said. No service whatsoever. He was doing the lonely chasing role that we usually see from Lyndon Dykes, wasn't he? But in all the clips, he looks like a Charlie Austin type striker for me. Decent composure, good positioning. Whether we service him correctly is, as we said, it's another matter, isn't it? And something we'll no doubt discuss throughout the season. But in the last 10 years at this level, we've been lucky to have a striker get into double figures. So if he can do that as a minimum, we'll take it from there. Next signing, biggest one, I suppose, was Jonathan Varane. After a month of thinking he was going to sign, he finally has. French midfielder, signed from Sporting Gijon. Happy with that one, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying before, that's the sort of position they needed to improve in. You saw the difference Hayden made last year when they played out and he just played on the half turn and we was away and moving up the pitch compared to what was before with Dizelle, who would just give it back to the centre half and would be stuck at the edge of their own box. And you saw it against Brighton, Colback just giving it straight back to the goalkeeper or the centre halves, and we couldn't get out. And you need someone who's brave in that position. And from what we heard about him, I haven't seen him play. I've just seen the clips and that. But it sounds like that's the sort of player he is. He's going to try and play on the half turn, get us up the pitch, and that's what we need. And he's a young player with potential. They've got him relatively cheaply. So we will see how he does. It sounds an exciting signing. He's someone they've wanted for a while. So they've obviously been looking at him for quite a while.
Yeah, definitely. There was something in the data that they really wanted because they've never given up on him, have they? Brian, do you think Varane joining ends any speculation of Isaac Hayden returning this summer?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that probably was a deal too far. There was no way it was going to happen. It's sad in a way because I think that he wanted to come back. He enjoyed his time here, and it would have been a benefit to everyone, I think. But no, I think that as Dave said, Jonathan Varane, when he comes in, is going to be a bit like Ali Fallin in terms of distribution from the defence out into the attack. He is going to be the playmaker, and it's going to be really interesting to see how well he does. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, if he's half the player Ali Fallin was, then we'll be very happy, won't we?
I'll take that, yeah.
If we do still sign Isaac Hayden, I'd say it's a penny for Elijah Dixon-Bonner's thoughts because I'd feel sorry for him if he was another one to join in the middle. Other two signings maybe look like ones who we're going to see bit part roles from. Heverton Santos signed, billed as a right back, but we've been seeing him as right wing, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be players for the development squad, and that you maybe see towards the end of the season or next year, similar to when they brought in the likes of Chair and Eze 6-7 years ago and brought them through. So I think that's kind of what they're trying to do with these young ones. There's the Scottish defender Morrison as well, and the Aussie winger. Hopefully they get through and they can break into the team this season, but I'd be surprised if there's anywhere near the starting 11 at the start of the season. I think it'll be a bit of a slow burn for them.
Yeah, Santos in particular for me doesn't maybe look like he has the physical attributes to be a fullback in this league. Interesting to see how you integrate him. Liam Morrison, you'd think he's almost certainly going to start the season as third choice, and he'll need to take any opportunities that has come his way. We knew Paul Nardi had signed when we did our midsummer show. What have you made of him in pre-season, Brian?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, we're playing out from the back. He is a far better ball player. He was almost like a matador against Brighton. At one stage, he just held onto the ball and was taunting them. Come on, take it off me. If you think you can do it, come on. Which I thought was a wee bit bold, but there we go. No, I am impressed with him. He made a few mistakes yesterday. When I was watching the game, I thought he was a bit wild with some of his distribution. But taking that aside, I feel far more confident with him than I did with Begovic. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, definitely promising early signs. And against Spurs in particular, I thought he was man of the match. He could be a bet for player of the season, potentially because of how much of an upgrade it seems he could be. Hopefully, he continues it for the next 46 games, that's for sure. If we have a look at the squad as a whole, though, taking all this into account, the ins, the outs, has pre-season in particular made one thing clearer than ever? Brian, you almost said it before. It doesn't matter who comes and who goes. The difference in QPR, it's Ilias Chair, isn't it?
It is. I mean, unless they manage to clone him, which mightn't be a bad idea, or sign up his children for ready for when they're coming, we are stuck because he really does make a difference. I mean, Dave was saying about Chris Willock. When Chris Willock was functioning at 100% and was really committed, he was as good as Chair. And to have the two of them in the team was such a bonus. It really was. Last season wasn't Chris Willock's best by any stretch of the imagination. It was disappointed to see him come and go in terms of performance. But Ilias Chair all the time works hard for the side, and he provides that little extra that nobody's expecting. So yeah, he is the difference.
He is 100%. He's the difference between us being an okay side and potentially a very good side.
Yeah.
Dave, with Chris Willock being gone, are you surprised we aren't seeing it being more of a priority to replace him?
I think it needs to be. I think that's kind of the next area they need to look at. I mean, with Chair out of the side, and I mean, who knows if he'll end up being sold this summer still. There's still a lot of the window left, but they look weak in the wide areas. You know, Paul Smith's looked all right in pre-season, but, you know, his final ball and his final shot tends to let him down, and that's not ideal for a winger, is it really? That's their job. So I do think they need strengthening in those areas because you need to create more chances for the forward. There's no point bringing forwards in if you ain't going to create nothing for them. We haven't really created that much in these pre-season games, admittedly against good sides. But yeah, I do think that's something they need to look at. You know, I just look at the squad as a whole and how we finished, what we finished last season with and what we've got now, and we still look a lot weaker to me than how we finished last season. And that may well change in the next 3-4 weeks. It's a lot of the window left, but we do need to improve still if we are going to do better than last season.
Where are the weaknesses for you, Brian, still in the squad?
Well, funny you should mention that. If you look at the pre-season games, Kenneth Powell has not had a good pre-season, I don't think. And it was really interesting to notice that the balls were being sent down the right-hand side all the time. They're coming out from Jimmy Dunn and from Steve Cook and heading off down the right to Smith. And that to me said an awful lot because whenever they tried to come out from Kenneth Powell on the rare occasions, it just wasn't working for him. Something, whether it's the fact that he's unsettled because he's worried about moving or whatever, I don't know. You know, perhaps he doesn't want to get injured and ruin the deal, but it's not working for him, I don't think. And I'm not quite sure how they're going to get around this. We in the left back, we've just sent off Lakesh to Dundee. We've sort of said, well, okay, that's it. We can cover. I'm not sure how we're going to cover, but yeah, that is a concern for me. The left side, and of course that would include Ilias Chair when he comes back. So that would be a plus. I'm assuming he'd go back on the left anyway. But one thing that really puzzled me when we were talking about Smith, when he was at Charlton, he was playing mostly on the left-hand side, as a right-footed winger, and was very successful doing that. So maybe we should think about putting Ilias Chair when he comes back and is fully fit on the right-hand side.
Can't see them doing that, honestly. Ilias Chair spent his last 4 or 5 years over there, hasn't he? He's played central sometimes, but I don't think he's really ever played from the right. And Paul Smith, it just seems to be where Cifuentes wants him. But Dave was right before, looks still to be the same thing where he gets into a good position, but he can't finish, and his final ball isn't particularly great. For me, it's just the lack of creativity is the issue, because people keep saying sign a striker, but we've got 3 on the books, so it's not realistic unless Dykes moves on that we're going to get another striker, really. And they all have the same problem. They don't get enough service. And now that Willock's gone, with Chair injured, that has to be, for me, the priority. They've got to get in at least 1, maybe 2 creative midfielders to try and open up teams, create chances for the strikers to hopefully score from. Jimmy Dunn was a question mark ahead of the season, wasn't he, whether he would continue at right back? Certainly looks like he will. Where does that leave Reggie Cannon, Dave?
I really don't know. He hasn't really featured at all pre-season. I found it quite bizarre. There was a big fanfare when they brought him in, and he got quite a long contract, and he seems completely out of the picture at the minute. I don't know if something's happened behind the scenes, but, you know, I said to you before, I didn't think Dunn would start this season at right back. I thought he'd done brilliantly last year, but I thought they'd probably look to phase him out of that, but that's not what's going to happen. He looks certain to start the season at right back, and I don't really see Cannon breaking in unless something major changes. It seems a real odd one.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not really altered the starting 11 much in pre-season. He's clearly got his idea of his strongest team, and it every time has had Jimmy Dunn at right back. And more I get the impression that Cifuentes doesn't rate Cannon. And to be honest, based on what we've seen of him, I tend to agree with him. He's not really proved that he's the number one choice, especially at right back. What have you made of the youngsters, Dave? They looked quite bright in pre-season.
Yeah, I think Coley's done well in the games he's played, and Lloyd as well out wide. They look bright. Players that I think could be involved during the season. They could play a fair bit as we go along. Hopefully they both get their chance, but it's been difficult for them because they've been up against, apart from the Reading game, up against some really top sides, so they're not really going to get that much chance going forward. It'll be different, I think, when the season starts, but both of them, I think, should be around the squad, or at least on the bench, getting on, or maybe starting some games this season.
Yeah, Alfie Lloyd did all right, didn't he? And like you said, the Australian lad, Benny, he looks like he could have something about him, whether they're sent out on loans, even for the first half of the season, and see how they do. But it's interesting that at least we've got some maybe better prospects than 12 months ago when we were bemoaning the lack of options we had coming from the youth team. Who do you think is going to be the captain, Dave? That's the next question, because it's been rotating through pre-season. Who do you think it's going to end up being?
I would have had money on Steve Cook as a certainty, but he hasn't been picked as a captain for any of these games, so maybe not. I think it probably maybe Sam Field, I think, because you're probably going to have as captain someone who's going to play every week. Field's probably likely to play most weeks. So I think he might go with him, but I mean, for me, the arm, who the captain is doesn't really matter. You need 4 or 5 leaders on the pitch, and you're going to have that with likes of Cook, Clark-Salter, Dunn, Field. So, whoever wears the armband isn't the be all and end all, but I would say it'd probably be Field.
Who do you think, Brian?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, Dave's coming up with virtually the same thing I'm thinking. You certainly don't want a goalkeeper or a striker doing it because they're at both ends of the pitch, so they're not going to be of use when you're talking to the referee. And I think it's got to be somebody who's reliable, somebody with a bit of a head on them, and that I would have thought would go with Steve Cook or Sam Field. And for whatever reason, he hasn't chosen Steve Cook. But Sam Field is there. Both of them have got the experience, I believe, of being a captain. And of the two, I'd slightly favour Sam Field.
Yeah, I'd like it to be Steve Cook. He just seems the logical pick, but maybe he just sees him as a leader anyway, so he doesn't feel like he needs to give him the armband. I wonder whether a left field pick could be Ilias Chair, maybe, to after everything he's been through in the last few months, maybe to give him something to feed off for the season. But we'll see who he picks. As long as it's not the goalkeeper, I don't like it when it's the goalkeeper again. If we move on to the Championship overall, our predictions regarding that. Last season, the 3 relegated sides, Leicester, Southampton and Leeds, always looked like it was going to be tough to compete against them. And in the end, they made up 3 of the top 4. This season, it's Luton, Burnley, Sheffield United. The 3 promoted sides from the year before all came straight back down to us. Famous last words, Dave, but not quite as daunting, those 3.
No, I don't think so. I think they're going to be strong, aren't they? When you look at their squad on paper, they're all good sides, and they've got it in them to go out and blow everyone away the next few weeks with bringing players in. They'll have money to spend, won't they? So you'd think they'd all be up there, but I don't think they look as daunting as Leeds, Southampton and Leicester did last year. I think from day one last year, you thought them 3 are going to be your top 3. It's between them to go up, wasn't it? And, Ipswich done fantastic to break into that, but I think it's a lot more open this year. I think there's some other sides I quite fancy Coventry to do well this year. I think it's a little bit more open. You look at the league every year. You can put a blanket over after league, and you wouldn't be surprised if, thinking of us, we could finish in the playoffs or bottom 4, and you wouldn't be overly shocked either way at the minute. And you could say that about nearly every team in this league. You just don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got in my notes here that most of the teams you could toss a coin and that one goes ahead of that one, like the likes of your Swanseas and your Watfords and Stokes, teams like that. What about the strugglers, Brian? Who do you think is going to be at the wrong end of the table?
Naturally, you're going to think in terms of those who've just come up, like to be the ones going back down again. The exact reverse of what Dave just said about those going up into the Premier League, bouncing straight back down again. The only thing is you've got to remember that Ipswich did just that and did very well. Thank you very nice. I do think that Oxford, Derby and Portsmouth will wobble at first, but Derby and Pompey have got such a large following to help them through any bad period they have. It's always difficult to make sense of the crystal ball before the season actually starts. But I'm going to go for Oxford, Hull and Stoke as my surprise three.
I actually think Stoke could have a bit of a better season because they think they've finished 16th every year for about 5 or 6 years, haven't they? But I think they maybe do a little bit better. But like I say, it's a coin toss, isn't it? But you're thinking of who you think is going to struggle. Obviously, Plymouth with Rooney as well. They could be a train wreck waiting to happen, couldn't they? Blackburn have looked on the demise over the last 18 months. Preston not quite as consistent as they were either. Any other names you'd throw into the mix, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, all of those. Millwall, you don't really know what you're going to get there. They're good for 6 weeks and then dreadful for 6. So you don't know what's going to happen with them. There's so many teams. You wouldn't be surprised. I think it's going to be really topsy-turvy this year. I think you'll see teams like maybe Preston and Watford around the playoffs for a few weeks. And then before you know it, they're in the bottom 6. And I think it's going to be that sort of division this year. For me, there isn't an outstanding team on paper this year, and there isn't a terrible one that's you think they're definitely going down. So I do think it's going to be quite open.
Yeah, I think if you look at various predictions and previews from people, teams are going to be in wildly different predictions from one pundit to the next, which illustrates that point. Team there that we've not mentioned struggling or going up is, of course, QPR. We could be one of the teams at the top. We could well be struggling, but if we focus back on QPR to finish with, it is the $1 million question. And yes, we will be bringing these answers back up in the end of season review. Brian, you can go first. Where are QPR going to finish this season?
Yeah, I saw somewhere that somebody predicted that we would come 11th, some sort of analysis that they've done. I thought, well, that's pretty damn good. But honestly, it is anybody's to win or lose this one. It is very much open. But there are equally some very tight teams around us to think about in terms of quality and finishing. So I'm going to go for 12th.
Dave?
I'll go slightly low. I'm going to go 14th. I just don't think we've got enough goals in us. And that may well change in the next few weeks with transfers. I don't expect the squad we've got as we record this to be the one that ends the window. I think it will look different. But I just think we're strong at the back and we'll be difficult to beat, I think. But I can't see us finishing much higher than 14th unless we really improve the attacking side of our team.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on whether Salah steps up. If he does score twice as many as Dykes usually scores, then we could push forward. Personally, like I said before, I think Willock is still a big loss as it stands, but maybe they're going to get a replacement in. I always worry if someone like Steve Cook got a 2 to 3 month injury, that would set us back massively because he's so important. My note said 10th to 14th. I'm probably going to go for 11th, which is what Brian said that preview went for, just in the top half. But it wouldn't take much for us to push for the top 6. If we can get to that level we saw against Leeds, Coventry at the end of last season, anything is that possible in the league because it does look like it's much of a muchness between most of the teams. Just got to be consistent. And that's kind of what we were after January. Maybe we can do it again and have an enjoyable season. Just one last question. One QPR player to watch this season, Dave? Who do you think it could be?
I'm going to go for Coley. I just to hopefully break through. I think this could be his breakthrough year. Got a bit unlucky with injuries last year, so I'll say him.
What about you, Brian? One player to watch?
Yeah, no, Coley would be the one I'd choose as well because I think he's sparkled in pre-season, and I do feel that he's got the pace. He just needs to work on his finishing, but then again, he's not alone, So yeah, I would go with Coley as well.
Yeah, I think Daniel Benny, the little Aussie lad, could look quite good. He's probably not going to get enough game time. But from what I've seen of him, he looked like he has a lot of potential there. Just needs to get used to the style of football in this country, doesn't he? Well, yeah, there we go. We think QPR are going to finish around mid-table. You never know. A lot better than 12 months ago when I'm pretty sure we all said that we were absolutely bangs to rights and heading for League One. You'll have to let us know your predictions in the comments. And like I said at the start, get on our forum, share the journey with us on there this season. It's a good place to be to follow QPR. That's it for the season preview. Dave and I will be back. We'll be back later this week with the first QPR preview show of the season. We're focusing on the opening day clash against West Brom. If you missed our summer catch-up, it's worth me repeating that we're altering the podcast schedule slightly this season. Dave and I will be doing the general preview shows for the weekend matches, and Brian's going to be doing them with George for midweek matches and the cup match coming up soon as well. So you should get a separate preview show for every league and cup game this season. And Brian's going to be doing some shows in the international breaks too, catching up on all things QPR. So it should be a better structure and just clearer for everyone when the shows are coming on YouTube. Until those shows, though, thank you to Dave and Brian for their contributions. Thank you for watching. And here's hoping it's a fantastic 9 months ahead for QPR. Come on, you R's.
Come on, you R's.
We know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.